Question number 5 on the Math Practice HiSet test, FPT 6A, is probably one of the more difficult questions on the test because it comes with the need for a certain amount of knowledge of formulas that are not listed on your formula page. So understand that even though you're given a formula page for the HiSet, some of the questions that you'll be looking at require you to know certain formulas that are not already on there. This also requires you to be familiar with certain vocabulary. So for this question, you need to know what a vertex is, you need to know what a parabola is, and you need to know what an equation is. So I'm going to walk you through those things really quickly. First of all, an equation is something like this. It's an x equals or a y equals, and it's some sort of unknown that we can use to help us figure something out. And the equations are always set up in a way so that they work, and I will show you the format for this equation in just a minute. But first I want to talk to you about vertex and parabola. Now, if you saw question number 4 in a previous video, you've seen a little bit about the x and y coordinates and how they work. This takes place on an xy coordinate plane. So if you're looking at, this is the point of origin, this is our x-axis, this is our y-axis, this shape here is a parabola. It's sort of a bell shape, and it can open toward the top or it can open toward the bottom. Depending on which way it opens, either the lowest or the highest point is going to be the vertex of the parabola. So it just kind of depends on how your parabola is put together as to whether the vertex is going to be the highest point or if it's going to be the lowest point. Either way you go, the vertex of the parabola is going to either be the highest point or it's going to be the lowest point of your parabola. Okay, so looking at these two parabolas, we can see that there's a point here and there's a point here. Now here's the problem with this, is that you can't just necessarily look at these and figure out exactly where the vertex is. I've drawn my dots pretty large for these, but just because the dot right here is at the -6, 0, doesn't necessarily mean that that is what the actual coordinates are. So what we have to do is we have to be able to use these two formulas here and here to work with our y coordinate and our x coordinate. So this right here is the equation for your y coordinate. And if you look at how this is written, it's ax squared plus bx plus c, and all of that is equal to y. Y is not some random arbitrary concept. Y is actually the y in your coordinate plane, and the x in here is actually the x in your coordinate plane. So by the time we're finished with this, with figuring out this problem, you will know exactly what the coordinates are for your vertex depending on what your particular equation looks like. So this is what our question is. Let me go back to the question. The question is, what are the coordinates of the vertex of the parabola represented by the equation? And if you notice, the way the coordinates are listed is you always have an x coordinate and then your y coordinate. So these are our 5 options. So we know that the parabola is going to fall somewhere between -160 is the smallest number, and 20 is the largest number. That's quite a range. So we can't just imagine what this is going to look like. We have to actually use the formula that they've given us. This is the equation that we're working with right here, and what I've done is I've rewritten this down here so that we know what the question is that we're looking at. So in terms of this, what we have is the a part of our equation is a -5. The b part of our equation is a +30. Those are the two numbers that we're going to be working with to figure out our x coordinate. So what we're going to start with is the b part of this equation, and the b part is a 30. But to be able to work this equation correctly, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to make this become a negative 30, okay? So the way this is going to work is that it's going to be a negative 30 because you're going to take the negative b and you're going to put it over 2 times whatever your a is. Our a was a negative 5 right here, okay? So we're going to take our negative 30 and put it over 2 times our negative 5. What we're going to get from these two is we're going to get our negative 30, and that's going to be over a negative 10. When you divide this out, negative 30 divided by negative 10, two negatives will equal a positive when you're multiplying or dividing. So negative 10 will go into negative 30 positive 3 times. Okay, so that means that 3 is going to be our x coordinate. So whatever y is going to be based on the fact that 3 is our x coordinate. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this 3 and we're going to substitute it into our original equation. So every time we see an x now, we're going to put a 3 in its place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a negative, let me switch back, here we go. I'm going to have a negative 5 and I'm going to multiply it by 3, and that's going to be squared. I'm going to go back in and put my square in just a minute, plus 30 times 3 minus 25. So this is what our new equation would look like. Let me add my square back in right here. Okay, so this is what our equation would look like, and all of this is going to be equal to y. It will be our y coordinate. So now I just do the math on it. And the way I'm going to do this math, of course, is I'm going to use my order of operations. It does not change no matter what kind, that's an A, no matter what kind of function you're doing. You're going to start with parentheses, then do exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. So parentheses, we have this 3 in parentheses and we have this 3 in parentheses. Exponents, we have this right here. So we're going to start with our 3 squared. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to rewrite this, doing the math as I go. So this is going to be negative 5, 3 squared, 3 times 3, that gives us a 9, plus 30 times 3, I'm going to go ahead and do that since we're doing our parentheses. That's going to give me a 90 minus 25. Now I'm going to finish out my multiplication here. Negative 5 times 9 is going to give me a negative 45 plus 90 minus 25. Now at this point, if you want to use your calculator to make sure that your math is correct, you can. You're going to take your negative 45. This calculator doesn't seem to like negatives. Okay, negative 45. We're going to add it to 90. And we're going to get a positive 45. Then we're going to subtract 25 more, and we're going to get a 20. So what we end up with for this part then is going to be 20. Going to move my calculator now. So all of this was giving me my y coordinate. So my y coordinate is going to be a 20. Okay? So now I know that the x is a 3 and the y is a 20. So if I go back here, what it would actually look like, this only goes up to 10. So I would have to go way, way up here off of the plane to figure this out. But I would be going out to the 3, which is right here, and up to the 20 to find my vertex of the parabola. You don't have to do all of that. All they're asking you for is the coordinates. And if you look at your possible answers here, C is your answer. Now, in the case of this particular question, and in the same mode that we've been in concerning trying to save time on this test, if you look at the answers, The x's are 6, 5, 3, 1, and -3. So what you could have done is once you figured out the y coordinate as being 3, you knew that there was only one option for the answer. It had to be C. So you could have stopped there without doing the substitution. However, if this last one would have been a regular 3 instead of a -3, had it been a positive, then you would have had to go ahead and go through to find the y to make sure that 20 was the answer instead of -160. So in some cases, you just have to use your best judgment with this, but always as you're working, look at the answers, and if you get to the point where you figured out part of what you're dealing with, but you haven't figured out the other part yet, sometimes you can stop there. It's the same as what we were doing with question number 4. We got to a point where we knew what the answer had to be, and we could have cut a few minutes off of our time. The same thing with this. If you're only solving for x and you don't have to solve for y, you can cut off several minutes depending on how long it takes you to do the math involved in this, because you know already what you're dealing with as far as what happens when you get to your x. Now this is something that you're going to have to put to memory. This is not something that's going to be written on the test for you. So what you're going to have to memorize is you're going to have to memorize what this formula looks like so that you can recognize it when you see it, and you're going to have to remember that you're taking the -b, which is this number right here, and you're putting it over 2 times the a, which is this number right here. And if you can't remember those, then you're going to have a hard time with questions about the vertex of a parabola, because these things are they're the things that you're going to have to know to be able to answer those questions. So as you are studying for the test, think about this, and my suggestion is always, whenever you sit down to take the test and they give you the math portion of it, as soon as that testing person says, the test administrator says, it's time to begin, take your scratch paper and immediately write down the formulas that you remember and what their purpose is. Put it on your scratch paper. That way when you come across a question about the vertex of a parabola, you know that what you're looking for is -b over 2 times a, and you won't have any problems figuring out what's going on with this. Another little hint is that equations are always written from left to right, so if there is a situation where you can't remember which one of these numbers is a and which one is b and which one is c, a is going to come first as the 5, b is the -5, b is going to be the +30, and c is going to be the -25. They're always written left to right, so that's going to help you a considerable amount also on this particular type of question. What I've typically seen is that there's generally only 1 or 2 questions dealing with parabolas and dealing with vertices. Vertices is plural of vertex. Let me write that word for you, because I want you to be familiar with what it looks like. It's vertices, which is the plural of vertex. So either one of those 2 words means the same thing. It means either the very highest point right here or the very lowest point right here of a parabola, and your parabola is bell-shaped. So hopefully that will help you be able to remember these things for when you do questions like number 5.